I have 30 days to stop my parents from giving my house to my married brother, all because I'm not starting a family. The ticking clock began on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening when my phone lit up with a message from my mother. We need to talk about the house. Come for dinner this Sunday? Important? Simple words, innocuous even. But something in that text message sent a cold shiver down my spine. The house she referred to wasn't just any property. It was my house. The two-story Victorian I'd been living in for the past 3 years. The home I'd renovated with my own hands, spending weekends stripping ancient wallpaper and refinishing hardwood floors. The place where I'd finally felt settled at 34 years old. Technically, the house belonged to my parents. It had been a family property for generations, passed down from my great-grandparents. When my grandmother died 4 years ago, my parents inherited it. They'd been living overseas for their retirement and had no use for it. So they'd let me move in with the understanding that someday it would be mine. Think of it as an early inheritance, Dad had said, handing me the keys with a smile. We'd rather see you enjoy it while we're alive. There had never been a formal agreement, no contract, just a family understanding. And I'd taken them at their word, investing thousands of dollars and countless hours into restoring the home they promised would one day be mine. But something about my mother's text felt ominous, important. The kind of important that upends lives. I replied with a casual, "Sure, see you Sunday," while my stomach tied itself into knots. The bombshell Sunday dinner at my parents' rental condo started normally enough. Mom made her signature roast chicken. Dad poured the wine a little too generously. We chatted about their recent trip to Portugal and my latest freelance graphic design projects. Everything felt normal, until it wasn't. "So," Mom said, setting down her fork with precision after the plates were cleared, "we wanted to talk to you about the house." Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but nodded. "We've been thinking about the future, James. About legacy." Something cold settled in the pit of my stomach. "What about it?" "Well," Mom continued, her voice taking on that artificially cheerful tone she used when delivering bad news, "your brother Michael and Olivia are expecting their second child now." "I know," I said carefully. "They told me last month. I'm happy for them." "Yes, and we're thrilled to have another grandchild on the way," Dad added. "Family is so important at our age." I nodded, still not seeing where this was going, but dreading it nonetheless. Mom reached for her wine glass. "The thing is, they're really outgrowing that apartment of theirs. 2 children in a 2-bedroom downtown flat. It's just not practical." The cold feeling in my stomach turned to ice. And we've been thinking," Dad said, taking over, "that perhaps the family home would be better utilized by, well, a family." There it was. The bomb dropped casually over dessert plates and half-empty wine glasses. "I live there," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "It's my home." "Of course, dear," Mom said quickly. "And you've done wonderful things with it. But it's a 4-bedroom house. For just one person, it's wasteful," I supplied, feeling heat rise to my face. Dad sighed. "That's not the word I'd choose. But Michael and Olivia could really use the space, with the children and all. And you're established in your career, not tied down. You have options." "Not tied down," I repeated. "Not married. No children. Disposable." "We've thought about this carefully," Mom said. "We're flying back to Barcelona in 30 days, and we'd like to have this settled before we leave." "Settled?" My voice was rising now, control slipping. "Like I'm a piece of furniture you need to relocate?" "James," Dad said sternly, "be reasonable. We're talking about what's best for the family." "I am family," I shot back. "Or have you forgotten that part?" Mom reached across the table, attempting to take my hand. I pulled away. "Of course you are, dear," she said soothingly. "But Michael is starting his family now. It's the natural progression of things. You're just on a different path. Different, less valuable, less deserving." "I've put thousands into that house," I said. 3 years of renovations, my savings, my labor. "And we appreciate that," Dad replied. "We'll compensate you, of course, help you find somewhere new." Somewhere new, as if my home, the place I'd poured my heart into, was interchangeable with any other residence. "You promised me that house," I said, my voice quiet now, dangerous. "You said it was my early inheritance." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Circumstances change," Dad said finally. "Family needs must come first." I stood up, unable to remain seated, feeling like the walls were closing in. "And my needs don't count as family needs, is that it? Because I'm single?" "Don't be dramatic, James," Mom said sharply. "This isn't about your relationship status. It's about practical use of a family asset." "Bullshit," I said, the word exploding from me. My parents flinched. I rarely swore in front of them. If I had a wife and 2.5 kids, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Dad stood too, his face flushing. "That's enough. We've made our decision. Michael, Olivia, and the children will be moving into the house next month. We wanted to give you these 30 days as courtesy to make arrangements." "Courtesy?" I laughed, a hollow sound. "You're kicking me out of my home as a courtesy?" "It's not your home, James," Mom said quietly. "Not legally. And we need you to remember that." Those words, cold, legal, precise, cut deeper than any shouting match could have. They were right. I had no legal claim, no paperwork, just a verbal promise that was now being broken. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. "James, don't leave like this," Mom called after me. I turned back, hand on the doorknob. "You've given me 30 days, right? Well, I'm going to use them. This isn't over." The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed my racing heart. 30 days to save my home. 30 days to change my parents' minds. 30 days to prove that my life, my single, childless life, had value too. The clock was ticking. Day 1. Shock and rage. I barely remember the drive home that night. The familiar streets blurred past as my mind raced through options, each seeming more implausible than the last. My house, no, not legally my house, I reminded myself bitterly, stood illuminated by a single porch light I'd left on. It looked just as it always had. The freshly painted blue trim I'd finished last summer. The restored stained glass accents in the front door. The carefully tended garden beds flanking the walkway. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. I walked through each room that night, touching door frames and window sills I'd sanded by hand, running fingers along walls I'd painted, remembering weekends spent on ladders and crawling under cabinets to update plumbing. 3 years of sweat equity that my parents had just dismissed with a wave of their hands. Anger bubbled up inside me, hot and fierce. How dare they? How dare they make promises? Let me invest years of my life and thousands of dollars, only to snatch it away because my brother had procreated and I hadn't. I pulled out my phone and fired off a text to Michael. "Did you know about this?" His response came quickly, suspiciously so. "Mom and Dad told us last week. I wanted to tell you myself, but they insisted." "I'm sorry, man. Sorry." As if sorry could make up for stealing my home. "Were you going to just show up with a moving van and hope I'd be okay with it?" I typed back. "It's not like that. We can talk about this." "When? Before or after you take my house?" There was a long pause before his reply. "This isn't easy for me either. But think about the kids, James. They need stability, space to grow up. And I don't deserve stability. Space, a home? That's not what I'm saying. Look, come over tomorrow. Let's talk in person." I tossed my phone aside without replying. Michael had always been the golden child, the one who followed life's script to the letter. College, career, marriage, children. Right on schedule, checking all the boxes society deemed important. Meanwhile, I'd taken a different path. After college, I'd traveled, worked odd jobs that interested me, eventually building a successful freelance design business that let me work from anywhere. I had friends, hobbies, a life I enjoyed. Just not the spouse and children my parents seemed to think were the only markers of a successful adulthood. Now, at 34, I was being told that my life choices made me less deserving of security than my brother. That his traditional path trumped my happiness. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sank onto the window seat in the living room. The window seat I'd rebuilt with reclaimed wood from the property's old shed. Outside, the moon cast long shadows across the yard where I'd spent countless hours landscaping. 30 days. What could I possibly do in 30 days to change my parents' minds? For the first time since I was a teenager, I put my head in my hands and cried. From anger, from betrayal, from the sheer injustice of it all. Then I wiped my eyes, pulled out a notebook, and started making plans. If my parents wanted a fight, they'd get one. Day 2. Confronting Michael. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, the shock had crystallized into determination. My first move, confront Michael directly, without our parents mediating. His apartment was in a trendy downtown high-rise, the kind with a doorman and a rooftop pool. Michael had always valued status markers, the right address, the right car, the right clothes. It was one of the fundamental differences between us. Olivia answered the door, her 7 months pregnant belly leading the way. Emily, their 3-year-old, peeked out from behind her legs. "James," Olivia said, clearly surprised. "We weren't expecting you." "I need to talk to Michael," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Emily was watching, after all. "He's on a work call, but I'll wait." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in. Would you like some coffee?" The apartment was as I remembered it. Expensively furnished, but small, especially with toys scattered across every surface. I could see how a second child would make the space feel cramped, but that wasn't my problem. "No coffee, thanks," I said, remaining standing. "Just Michael." "Uncle James!" Emily finally overcame her shyness and launched herself at my legs. Despite my mood, I smiled and picked her up. "Hey, Squirt, how's my favorite niece?" "I'm your only niece," she giggled, our usual exchange. "Still my favorite," I said, giving her a quick hug before setting her down. Michael emerged from the home office, ending his call as he walked in. "James, I thought we were going to talk later." "Now seemed better," I replied flatly. He glanced at Olivia, who took the hint. "Emily, let's go color in your room while Daddy and Uncle James talk, okay?" Once they were gone, Michael gestured to the couch. "Look, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I interrupted. "Upset is what happens when someone cuts you off in traffic. This is way beyond upset, Michael. He sighed, running a hand through his hair that was already thinning in the same pattern as our father's. What did you expect me to do? Turn down a house? A yard for the kids? In this market? I expected you to remember that I live there, I said, struggling to keep my voice down. That it's been my home for 3 years. That I've put blood, sweat, and serious money into renovating it. And Mom and Dad said they'll compensate you for... It's not about the money. Now I was having trouble controlling my volume. It's about the fact that they promised me that house, that I've built my life around that promise. And now, because you decided to have another kid, I'm suddenly disposable. Michael had the grace to look uncomfortable. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me. He sat down heavily on the couch. Look, Mom and Dad approached us. They suggested it, not me. What was I supposed to say? No thanks. I don't want a 4-bedroom house in the best school district in town. How about, that's my brother's home. I'm not taking it from him? Michael looked away. It's their house, James, legally. They get to decide. Don't hide behind legalities. This is about right and wrong, and you know it. What I know, he said, voice hardening, is that I have a family to think about. A growing family. Emily needs a yard to play in. The new baby will need his own room. And I need a home, I nearly shouted. Why does your need automatically trump mine? Michael stood up, frustration evident in his posture. Because that's how life works, James. People with families get priority. That's just the way it is. If you wanted security, maybe you should have settled down by now instead of, he gestured vaguely, doing whatever it is you've been doing. There it was. The judgment I'd always suspected lurked beneath my brother's supportive facade. So because I'm not married with kids, I don't deserve stability? A home? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I said coldly. You think your lifestyle choices make you more deserving than me. He didn't deny it, which told me everything. You know what? I said, grabbing my jacket. I've spent my entire adult life hearing about how I need to settle down, find the one, start a family. As if the life I've built isn't valid without those things. And now, my own brother thinks it's fine to take my home because his life choices align better with our parents' expectations. James, I'm not done, I cut him off. You have 30 days to change your plans, Michael. Find another house, because I'm not leaving mine. Not for you, not for Mom and Dad, not for anyone. You don't have a choice, he said, his voice quiet but firm. It's their house. We'll see about that, I replied, turning to leave. Tell Emily I said goodbye. As I walked out, I heard Olivia's voice from the hallway. Is everything okay? Michael's response floated after me. He'll come around. He always does. Not this time, I thought grimly. Not this time. Day 3. Legal realities. The next morning, I called in a favor from my college roommate, Sam, who had become a real estate attorney. He agreed to meet me for lunch to discuss my options. Let me get this straight, Sam said after I explained the situation. You've been living in the house for 3 years. Your parents verbally told you it would be your inheritance. You've made substantial improvements, but there's no written agreement of any kind, no lease, no contract to purchase, nothing. I shook my head, the gravity of my situation sinking in further with each question. And your name isn't on the deed or mortgage in any capacity? No, they own it outright. Sam sighed, pushing his half-eaten sandwich aside. James, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Legally, you don't have much ground to stand on. There has to be something, I insisted. What about all the money I've put into the house? The improvements? You might have a case for what we call unjust enrichment, Sam explained, essentially arguing that your parents will profit unfairly from your investments in the property. But it's complicated, expensive to litigate, and frankly, not a slam dunk. What about verbal contracts? They promised me the house. Verbal contracts can be binding in some circumstances, but they're notoriously difficult to prove. It would be your word against theirs. And if they deny making such promises, he trailed off, his expression saying everything. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. So legally, I'm screwed. Not necessarily screwed, Sam said diplomatically, but definitely at a disadvantage. Your best bet might be negotiation rather than litigation. Try to reach a compromise with your parents. They've made it clear there's no room for compromise. They want me out in 30 days so Michael and his family can move in. Sam looked thoughtful. Have you documented all the improvements you've made to the property? Kept receipts, before and after photos? Most of them, yes. Good. That could strengthen your position for compensation at least. He hesitated. There's one other thing you could try, though it's a bit of a nuclear option. I'm listening. In some states, if you've been living somewhere long enough, even without a formal agreement, you could claim tenants' rights. They would legally have to evict you, which is a process that takes time, more than 30 days, certainly. I considered this, so I could refuse to leave, force them to go through formal eviction proceedings? Technically, yes, but James, Sam leaned forward, his expression serious. That's a bridge-burning move. It would likely destroy your relationship with your parents. Possibly your brother, too. They're already demolishing those bridges, I said bitterly. They're choosing Michael over me because he's married with kids, and I'm not. I understand you're hurt, Sam said carefully. But escalating to legal warfare should be a last resort. Try talking to them again. Explain how much the house means to you, why you can't just walk away. I nodded, though I had little hope that emotional appeals would work. My parents had made their priorities crystal clear. If that fails, Sam continued, come back to me. We'll look at all your options. Just be sure this is a hill you want to die on. It's my home, Sam, I said simply. If that's not worth fighting for, what is? As I left the restaurant, my phone pinged with a message from my mother. Your father and I would like to see the house tomorrow, to assess what compensation we owe you for improvements. I stared at the message, anger rising again. They were really going through with this. In their minds, it was already settled. Fine, I typed back. Tomorrow at 2. Then I spent the rest of the day gathering every receipt, every before and after photo, every piece of evidence showing what I'd invested in the house they were taking from me. If they wanted to reduce my home to a financial transaction, I'd make sure they paid full price. Day 8. The assessment. My parents arrived precisely at 2 p.m., dressed as if they were visiting an open house rather than the home of their son. Mom carried a notebook. Dad had his business face on, the expression he used when negotiating contracts during his working years. James, Mom said, attempting a hug that I sidestepped. Thank you for agreeing to this. Not like I had much choice, I replied coolly. Dad frowned at my tone but said nothing, his eyes already scanning the entryway where I'd restored the original woodwork, bringing the century-old craftsmanship back to life. The house looks wonderful, Mom commented. You've really done amazing work here. I know, I said flatly. That was the point. I was investing in my future. My home. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably. Yes? Well, why don't you show us what improvements you've made, so we can be fair about compensation? Fair, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Let's start in the kitchen. I led them through the house methodically, pointing out every repair, every upgrade, every hour of labor I'd invested. The new countertops in the kitchen, the restored hardwood floors throughout the first floor, the completely renovated master bathroom, the landscaping that had transformed an overgrown yard into an outdoor living space. My parents took notes, occasionally murmuring to each other or asking questions about costs. They were being thorough. I had to give them that. Like good business people evaluating an asset. What about the sunroom? Mom asked as we finished touring the second floor. Have you done anything there? The sunroom had been my grandmother's favorite space, a glass-enclosed area overlooking the backyard. It had been in poor condition when I moved in, leaking, drafty, the wooden framework rotting in places. Come see for yourself, I said, leading them down the stairs and through the house to the back. I opened the door to the sunroom and watched their expressions change from professional assessment to genuine surprise. I'd completely transformed the space, replacing the damaged framework with stronger materials while maintaining the vintage aesthetic, installing new glass, adding proper insulation and heating so the room could be used year-round. The space was filled with plants, comfortable furniture, a small desk where I often worked. James, Mom breathed. This is incredible. It was Grandma's favorite room, I said quietly. I wanted to honor that, make it special again. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt cross my father's face. You've put a lot of yourself into this place. That's what I've been trying to tell you, I said. This isn't just a house to me. It's my home. It's part of who I am. We stood in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun streaming through the glass, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a brief second, I thought maybe I'd gotten through to them. Then Mom snapped her notebook shut. We'll need to have a proper assessment done, of course, to determine fair market value for all the improvements. But rest assured, we'll make sure you're compensated appropriately. And just like that, the moment was gone. Is that all this is to you? I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. A financial transaction? Your son's happiness measured in dollars and cents? Of course not, Dad said stiffly. But we have to be practical. You're a single man. You can live anywhere. Michael and Olivia need stability for their children. And I don't need stability? I don't deserve a permanent home because I don't have kids? That's not what we're saying, Mom insisted, though her eyes said otherwise. It's exactly what you're saying, I countered. You believe that a real family deserves this house more than I do. That my life is somehow less valuable, less deserving of consideration, because I haven't followed the traditional path. Now you're being dramatic, Dad said dismissively. This isn't about your worth as a person. It's about efficient use of a family asset. A family asset you promised to me, I reminded him. Or has that inconvenient fact slipped your mind? Mom stepped between us, ever the peacemaker. James, please. We understand you're upset, but try to see the bigger picture. Your brother's children, your niece and soon-to-be nephew, will grow up in this house. Isn't there something beautiful about that? The next generation of our family filling these rooms? And what about my children, if I choose to have them someday? Or am I officially being written off as a genetic dead end? The shocked expressions on their faces would have been comical if the situation weren't so painful. Of course not, Dad sputtered. If your circumstances change, if I conform to your expectations, you mean, I interrupted. If I get married and have children on your timeline, then maybe I'll be worthy of consideration again. Is that it? They exchanged uncomfortable glances, their silence answering more honestly than words could have. I think we're done here, I said, moving toward the front door. You've seen the improvements. You can determine what you think they're worth. But know this. There isn't enough money in the world to compensate for what you're really taking from me. My sense of security, my trust in you as parents, my belief that your love was unconditional. Mom looked stricken. James, that's not fair. None of this is fair, I replied as I opened the front door. You have 22 days left to reconsider. After that, well, I guess we'll see what kind of relationship survives this. As they walked to their car, Mom turned back. We love you, James. This isn't about love. But it was. It was about love that came with conditions, with expectations, with a roadmap I was supposed to follow. And my failure to follow that map had cost me my home. Day 9 to 15, the community rally. After my parents left, I sat in the sunroom for hours, watching the light change as afternoon turned to evening. The magnitude of what I was facing settled over me like a physical weight. Despite all my determination, the legal reality was stark. I had few options. That night, I finally broke my silence about the situation, posting in our neighborhood's online community group. 3 years ago, I moved into my grandparents' old house on Maple Street with the understanding that it would eventually be mine. I've spent thousands renovating it, bringing it back to life, becoming part of this community. Now, my parents have decided to give the house to my married brother instead, because he has children and I don't. I have less than 30 days to find somewhere new to live. I wasn't expecting much. Perhaps some sympathetic comments, maybe advice on apartment hunting. What I got instead was an outpouring of support that left me stunned. Comments flooded in. That's discrimination against single people. Totally unfair. Your renovations have increased all our property values. We see how hard you've worked on that place. What can we do to help? This isn't right. By morning, the post had hundreds of comments. By afternoon, neighbors were stopping by in person. Mrs. Abernathy from across the street brought cookies and righteous indignation. It's not right, treating you like a second-class citizen just because you're not married with children. Tom from 2 doors down, a contractor who had occasionally given me renovation advice, offered his professional assessment. I could provide a formal appraisal of all your improvements. If they're going to push you out, they should at least pay market rate. Even people I barely knew expressed their support. The community had watched me transform the neglected property into one of the street's showcases. They'd waved as I worked in the yard, stopped to chat as I painted the exterior trim, complimented the gardens I'd planted. Then came the most unexpected ally of all.